Hello, this is a comparative analysis of the construction of the Empire State Building and the One World Trade Center, which are both based in New York City. The Empire State Building. The Empire State Building was built by several wealthy investors that formed the Empire State Building Incorporated, which was spearheaded by John J. Raskob. The purpose of the building was to, Raskob's perspective, was to rival Walter Chrysler, who was building the Chrysler Building. The Empire State Building is an office building. It was also a world-famous tourist attraction. The Empire State Building was built between 1930 and 1931, taking 1 year and 45 days. The Empire State Building is 102 stories high and was the tallest building in the world. The construction process was 25% under budget, and that is partially due to the impacts of the Great Depression and cheaper labour. Design. The Empire State Building was designed by architects Shreve, Lamb and Harmon, and the main design element was to be taller than 100 stories and to be taller than the Chrysler Building. The design would also aim to maximise the light that entered into the offices.
Demolition. On the site of the Empire State Building stood the Waldorf Astoria building. Steel canopies were constructed in order to protect passers-by from any debris from the demolition. Steel canopies were previously wooden, however issues with fire safety had occurred, which made them then become steel for this project. Most elements of the building were not recycled or reused, however some elements were, but most of the waste of the building was dumped in the ocean off New York.
The substructure. The excavations of the foundations began once the walls of the Waldorf Astoria had been demolished. Workers excavated to the depth of 40 feet from the surface, as can be seen in this image on the left. Pier holes were excavated and poured with concrete so the steel supports could rest on it. An auger was used to drill a hole into the ground to enable the formation of the pier holes. This can be seen in this image here, with these tall structures and also a lot of the work that's going on surrounding. 12 steel supports would run the entire height of the building from the foundations.
The superstructure and the steel frame. The Empire State Building is a steel frame building, and all the columns are fireproof with cinder concrete, which adds to their strength. The speed of construction was key to the design and the construction process, and 4.5 floors of steelwork were completed each week. The derrick cranes were used to haul the steel up to the construction of the steel frame, which added and helped to the speed of the construction of the steel frame. As you can see on the left, here are workers putting together the steel frame of the building. The steel was marked with its location according to the blueprints, and that also allowed for the quick and effective installation. The facade is in Art Deco style and is made of limestone due to its durability compared to other materials such as marble, which has been used on other buildings in New York such as St. Patrick's Cathedral, which requires regular maintenance and therefore limestone was chosen. As you can see, the building gradually goes back away from the street as it rises. This was not a design element, this was actually due to the New York State Zoning Commission regulations.
So you can see here with the facade, you have the 4-inch limestone here, and you have the 8-inch masonry behind. This is how the facade was actually built. This is an image of it. Finishes. So an Art Deco style interior. The floors in the office spaces were not finished though, to allow for tenants to personalise their offices. And the offices were separated by wooden or glass partition walls, and they envisaged an open plan office space, which actually came to reality in the 60s. So as can be seen in this image, this is actually the Fifth Avenue entrance, and it is the main entrance to the building. It's engraved mural finished in black Belgian marble. The finishes were completely swiftly after the floors were finished, which was key to the speed in which the building was finished. Services. So it had 58 elevators and 8 service elevators, and water tanks, as can be seen here, were actually stored within the building rather than on the roof, and that was an innovation at the time. Because when you go to New York, you see majority of the buildings still have these water tanks on top of the buildings, and it was such an innovation at the time, and probably still is.
Health and safety. At the time of construction work was the second most dangerous profession to mining in the United States. The safety of the Empire State Building was of a high level at the time. However, 5 workers did die in the demolition of the Waldorf Astoria. Elevators were used to transport workers to where they were needed, because previously steel workers had to climb up the side of the building with ladders, which was highly dangerous. This table shows where the main materials have come from for the Empire State, and they show that they come from far away from New York City.
Slide with sustainability. So at the time of construction, sustainability was not considered, as I've mentioned, with the materials. Retrofitting, however, of the Empire State Building occurred within the early to mid 2000s, and that led to a gold LEED standard certification, part of that program. So the retrofitting has cut the energy use of the building by 38%, saving $4.4 million in energy usage. Now, as can be seen on the left, here is a worker installing new windows, and that was a really important part of the retrofitting. All windows were actually retrofitted, but with a film that manages heat loss. 96% of the previous windows materials were reused. The One World Trade Center. The One World Trade Center. So a competition was selected for the pre-construction and the construction of the building. WSP were the engineers. So after the destruction caused during 9/11 on the former Twin Towers, a new World Trade Center was commissioned to be built, as can be seen on the left. It cost $3.2 billion US. The building is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, at 104 stories high, taller than the Empire State. Construction started in 2006 and ended in 2014, and functions as an office building, along with a tourist attraction.
The architects are Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and the new building has a memorial within the grounds, so the replacement also needed to be a statement building, whilst providing tribute to the building standing before. The top of the parapet level is the same height of the previous World Trade Centers, and the footprint is also the same. Safety and security were also main elements of the design, with the concrete and steel hybrid structure was designed for that feature of being safe and secure.
Health and safety. So an innovative system called a safety cocoon was used, and it was the first of its kind, especially for the size of the building. An innovative first responders only access stairwell has now become mandatory in New York building codes. Now, the One World Trade Center has resulted in building codes being changed in New York, but the designers did set out to do this because they wanted to improve the safety of the buildings in New York. The steel structure is also enhanced fire protection technology.
The construction process. Clearing of the debris from 9/11 was needed before any work could begin. After that, BIM was used to enhance collaboration between subcontractors and the design team. There was also a BIM command centre on site. BIM was essential to this project and was one of the first times BIM was used on a project of the scale. It helped with the design, coordination and documentation of the project.
The substructure is an 85 feet deep foundation, 200 feet square footprint, that's the same as the Twin Towers as mentioned. And the substructure was a really complex process due to the running of the PATH train system and the subway lines beneath that were going on during construction. So here you can see the PATH train lines. So the PATH train lines were covered during construction with a steel structure, which can't be seen yet, and that was to keep the wet concrete load off of the track. So a slurry wall actually surrounds the area, and that keeps out the river water, and it's an underground perimeter. It's built all the way down to the bedrock. So the spread and the strip foundations are placed actually upon the bedrock. The superstructure. So the concrete core is the strongest built in New York. It is surrounded by a steel moment frame, and the steel moment frame are beams welded together and embedded in the concrete. So as I've said, the steel beams are set into the core, which supports the floors, allowing for column-free interior space. And there are 40,800 metric tons of steel in this project. So there's 2 access stairs, as been mentioned, within the superstructure. And here you can see these sort of blue mesh. And this is the cocoon that I mentioned previously for the safety of the workers, which is 16 floors at a time. So that's an aerodynamic form of the building that reduces impact by the wind, and that can be seen here with the floor plan. So you have the square sort of base, and it moves up as it goes. Now it doesn't. If you look at the building, it doesn't move like that. Actually, in between these sections are isosceles triangles, and that gives the building an aerodynamic structure, which helps combat the forces of the wind, which is a key feature of high-rise design in New York City. The floors, as I said, are a triangular shape, and that results in an ever-changing reflection of light, which can be seen here. So on this photo here, whichever viewpoint you actually look at the building, wherever you are in the city, it does change the reflection of the light, and it makes for a really fascinating view. And that was part of the key part of the design, as can be seen here, of the darker shades. So it is all glass cladding, 1 million feet of 1 million feet squared of glass cladding. And it had the glass cladding has a high U value, which allows for temperature control within inside the building. And it's curtain wall design. It begins at 20 feet high and extends up to the observation deck, which is around here. So the finishes. The office spaces can come fully furnished, ready to move in, whilst also having options as no furnishing, as can be seen here. And also you can see the impact of the light coming through, which is and this sort of column-free structure, which was basically an advantage of such a strong concrete core. Services. So the One World Trade Center has 73 elevators, and the elevators are actually the fastest anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. And the elevators actually can create energy through their braking, which is a key part of sustainability, which we come on to now. 50% of the cement is from industrial byproducts, and 95% of the steel is recycled. Now, it did achieve a gold LEED standard, the same as the Empire State Building. The building, as I've said, produces some of its own energy for the regenerative braking of the elevators. It also has a management system that optimizes energy use using real-time sensors. Now, that is slightly similar to that of the Empire State Building, but it is a little bit different as the Empire State Building was retrofitted for this purpose. So, a review of the Empire State Building and the One World Trade Center. Similarities. Both buildings have been built as skyscrapers in New York City, and both have a main function as an office building and secondary for tourism. Both have steel frames, both are built on brownfield sites, and both buildings have achieved a gold LEED rating, although the Empire State is retrofitted.
The differences. So the One World Trade Center has a concrete core combined with a steel moment frame, whereas the Empire State has just a steel frame. The facade is a glass curtain wall at the One World Trade Center, whereas the Empire State Building features a limestone facade with Art Deco features. Health and safety features within the One World Trade Center enabled no deaths to occur. However, this will be a difference due to the time period, and for the time, the Empire State was a safer structure than other structures at the time. The One World Trade Center took significantly longer to build than the Empire State. However, this is probably due to the design feature of the building, and actually the fact behind the building being that it was designed to be built quickly ahead of the Chrysler Building. Concluding viewpoint. Despite both being skyscrapers both built in New York City, they differ significantly in terms of their design, construction methods, time to build, and safety features. The difference is representative of the time, however, and the difference between the time from when the Empire State Building was built and which the One World Trade Center was built is significant, and that probably is representative of the differences seen.
Thank you for watching. This is my reference list. Thank you again.